Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on. Mike, you have had quite an interesting career to date. You're an experienced solopreneur, successfully pitched and closed massive brands, the likes of Volvo and the government of Canada. You now run an agency, as I understand this, called Impact Leads, which really helps business owners re-examine their positioning and pricing in order to effectively find new leads and land quality clients without all the stress and issues that you've experienced in the past. I'm curious, you've had, I think you described it as a bit of a roller coaster ride initially before you got to the level of clarity that you have today. Could you take us back to that point in time where things just clicked and you knew which path to take from now on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all go through the roller coaster when we
Mhm.
start our own ventures. We have this vision. We think it's going to be so smooth, so easy. Everything's going to be just wonderful. And then that first thing hits you, and then the next, and the next. And so I think where I got stuck the most was actually a flaw in my mindset. I was afraid because I had never had a business before. And my opinion was, and my perception was that if you're not the best at everything in your company, then you're in trouble. If you can't leave yourself subjective to, oh, this person's way better at this than you. And so it was actually ego driven
Mhm.
management and ego driven hiring where I would actually want less of
Mhm.
the person so that I could make myself feel like I had the control. And I think the moment where and with that style of management, I almost went out of business twice. I had to fire all my staff. I
Mhm.
almost went bankrupt, like very close twice. And there was a moment after the second time, because firing my team was like probably one of the worst days of my entire life. I just had this moment of I can't do that again. There's something in the patterning, there's something going on here. And so I went inward and I was like, this has got to be my fault because I brought people on, let people go, been up, been down. There's something in the way that I'm leading this venture that's causing this friction. And so I had to really go inward and realize like I was being a horrible owner. I was being a terrible boss and I was limiting everybody's
Mhm.
potential capacity because I wanted to make sure that I felt good about.
Mhm.
And so that surrender was my path. Not I didn't have all the strategies at that moment, but that surrender was my path to leading in a
Mhm.
different way.
Did you recognize that at that point in time that it boiled down to your positioning and the way you were approaching pricing, or was there a bit more to it than that?
Yeah, so aside from the leadership, the other thing I was doing was I was trying to be
Mhm.
everything to everybody. Oh, cool, you need a website with your ads? Great. We do
Mhm.
that now too. Oh, you need social media, email copy, all this stuff? Great. We'll do that too. And I was doing it because I wanted to make sure that I got the yes. I wanted to make sure that I was constantly growing. And so I think the biggest issue I had in my positioning was I was trying to do everything. I was trying to be everything to everyone. I wanted the win. I wanted the box checked. And what happened was I ended up having to take on a lot of expertise that I had to learn from scratch. Okay, how does social work? How does email automation work? And it was so outside of the thing I was the most talented at. And so that extra time, energy, and bandwidth of me having to become an expert
Mhm.
in all these things and then find the staff to execute all these things, it just ballooned into this company that the position was originally it was, hey, we do Google ads, we do them for
Mhm.
simple businesses, we do them really well. And like I should have held on to that. The fact that I kind of let it go off
Mhm.
on all these tangents, that part of the positioning really hurt us quite a bit. And then when we had that moment where we snapped back and we're like, this is all we do. You want Facebook ads?
Mhm.
Not even us. Only Google ads, only this type of company. And everything just became so
Mhm.
smooth after that.
Brilliant. And I'd love to unpack that. I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
I first landed on that by knowing
Mhm.
what I was bad at. So, my general rule and how I coach people says if you are not a 7 out of 10 proficiency in a thing today, delegate it or cut it. Get it off your plate as soon as possible. There's only so much time in a day, and you only have so much like creative energy to operate in a day. So if you've got something, for example, being detail oriented, remembering to follow up, booking things, like going through forms that have a lot of like information and detail, my brain just goes like, it looks like it's like running around in a circle. I'm not good. I'm not detail oriented. I'm not organized in that way. And so those were the things that I got off my plate first. And that was a huge win for me. And I think a lot of people, they're like, I'm only 4 out of 10 at this. If I work really hard, I'll get to a 6. But is that what's more valuable? You going from an 8 to a 9 on something you're great at and that you enjoy doing? Or you getting from a 4 to a 6 where you're still not good, you still don't like doing it, but you're a little bit better now? So for me, my lanes are creating content and training and teaching people, sitting in on strategic calls and like taking that 10,000 foot view of what is the goal, where are we actually at, and what needs to go in, what needs to fit in to make that work. Me sitting in on those conversations and those calls makes us infinitely more money than me getting better at sending calendar
Certainly.
invites.
I'll ask you this question in order to perhaps get your take, or get you to elaborate a little bit more on what you just said. In that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
I think the self-awareness of the founder is the most important thing. And it sounds very woo, but I think when I was able to step in and say, okay, I don't understand this style of marketing, and I don't want to grow a big team to have all these arms of it, we're just going to stop doing it. But that took self-awareness because as a marketer, as a competitive guy, I'm like, I can figure it out. I can get us to the finish line. I can make sure we can deliver great email marketing. And we did, but at what cost? So I think self-awareness around 2 pieces, the things that you're great at and that you understand and that you can control very well, and then what you actually want your business to look like. Do you want to scale to 50, 100 clients? Or do you want 10 great clients that pay you super well that let you have a more relaxed life? So I think we get influenced by a lot of external factors. We see, oh, this guy posted on TikTok. He just got so many new customers. They're getting 400 leads a month. I want it. I want it. And it's, do you want it because it's shiny and it looks great? Or do you want it because that's like part of your identity as a brand and as a person? And I think really just being self-aware of what it is exactly that you want, so that you can just follow those actions and stop chasing so much. Because I was guilty of it. I used to chase.
Appreciate that. You've landed major clients like Moll and the government of Canada. I'm curious, did doing that shape your perspective on value-based pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think where most agency type and creative type people get stuck is they say, hey, here's my big list of all the things that I do. Here's my 50 deliverables, and this is the order that they go in, and yay, hire me because you're getting so many things for this price. And I think when you do that, all you're doing is you're putting your line items up on a menu to be compared to somebody. And so my approach to value is, instead of forcing what I see as value to the customer, it's actually finding out from the customer what they want. Hey, if we were to run this campaign for you, what does a home run win look like? Because I have my perception of what I think that brand wants, but we might get a response that's shockingly easier to execute than we expected, completely different. And when we do discovery, we go really deep on like where they're stuck, how long they've been stuck, what they've done to try and fix it, what would the ideal situation look like for them? Because when I bring forward a proposal on what we could do, it's being spoken in their voice and it's answering the questions that they want. Now, tactically in the back end, they probably don't care about all the nuanced things. But if you can present, hey, you want to go from A to B, this service will take you from A to B and we'll do our process to do it. It's, oh, great. They feel listened to, they feel acknowledged. And so I think the starting of value-based pricing is understanding what is valuable to the other person and bringing that.
So is there a bit of a framework or an exercise that you help your clients walk through in order to understand their clients' their own true value?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when you're doing or something, it's a little bit different than a creative or an administrative task, right? Because marketing, you can attach money
Mhm.
to an outcome. That's the low hanging fruit. We're like, if we get you this many clicks with this many opt-ins, with this many opportunities, with this many sales. So like leaving that out, because that's a numbers game. It's very easy to answer. But if you do, I build websites, I do HR consulting, I do whatever the case may be, where there's not necessarily like a tangible value that's like easy to paint the picture. I think the way to do it is making sure that you have the right sequence of questions so that the person you're speaking to can assign a value for you. And when you're talking about HR consulting, what would be the win? We want our employees to stay on an average of 6 months or 1 year longer. Great. And so I think what a lot of people do is they get the check mark, they get the answer, and then they're like, okay, let's jump to the next thing. But that person in that moment is willing to give you the value that they assign to this if you ask the questions. So next question becomes, what happens now when people leave? What are the pains? What are the costs associated with that? Well, we got to go back to the recruiter. We pay them their flat rate. They get their
Hmm.
percentage. Cool. How would you so what we want to do is get the actual monetary value that they see in the thing by extracting the questions. And so it's going to be a little bit different for each person, but the client has a value
Mhm.
in their mind of what they think this is worth for them. If you don't find that out and you just pitch whatever value you want it to be or what you assign, there's going to be a disconnect. They're going to feel like they weren't listened to. They're going to feel like they weren't understood. And then for me, it's what is that threshold? And that's where it becomes a bit tricky. So if they say, hey, if you make my employees stay 1 year longer each, that saves us $250,000 a year in recruiting and training and da da da. Okay. So if it's that, would you pay 50,000 to save that 250? Because why don't I get a percentage of the upside rather than saying I'm $75 an hour and it's going to take me 200 hours to execute this project? If I'm going to save you money or make you money, how much of that are you willing to give up to have that solution done? And so that's how I like the simplest way to zoom out and think about it is if I'm going to save you $250,000, which is money that you would have spent, can I have 50,000 of that to make that happen? You still are ahead 200,000. And a lot of people, when presented with that opportunity, would be like, oh, sure, great. So it's actually really getting to the bottom line of how the buyer is perceiving the value. And sometimes they don't actually see the value in what you do in the right way. So when that happens, you got to keep going deeper. And if they just see it as this is a $10,000 problem and your retainer starts at 10,000, it's like you don't align with that customer. It's time to walk away and not work
Okay.
with them.
And so you're asking questions to understand the cost of doing a particular process or business, so to speak, and then through that, helping them understand the value that you bring or the cost savings that you bring. Is there a component to understanding their emotions associated with the process and tasks that you're talking about, as well as the overflow into how they're perceived within a team or an organization?
Yep. Yeah. And it's funny because getting the value comes down to asking questions, but understanding the gap and the pain that they're in also would come down for me to asking questions. And obviously, when you're doing
Mm.
that function, it's harder because people don't necessarily want to show up
Yeah.
as vulnerable. They don't want to say, hey, this is
Mhm.
keeping me up at night. Hey, this is making me a distracted person at home. Hey, they don't want to admit that. So, what I will typically do is I talk about people just like you, right? So I'm never going to say, hey, you're probably acting like you're probably a bad dad right now because you're distracted because this is keeping you up at night. If I said that to someone, they'd be like, are you out of your mind? You don't tell me how I feel. Or like they would be pretty offended by that. And so what I do is I connect it to a story of how someone else just like them had that experience. Hey, so, we had this customer. What they told us was that, that not having this problem solved was a big issue because they didn't feel confident to keep investing and bringing on their team, and they got very stagnant, which started to
Mm.
draw on them. They were losing sleep over it. I don't know what that looks like for you, but what they found was through this solution. So you're letting them see their story through someone
Mhm.
else's lens. So I like to make the connection that way because yeah, when it comes to the emotional side and creating the gap of like how far are you from having a solution? you do need to get them emotionally charged. And I think I've trained and coached a lot of people in sales. I have a lot of people say, isn't that manipulation? And yes, it can. If you take it to that level, it could be. But ultimately, if what you do solves a problem that somebody has, it's your responsibility to get them on board, get them creating the desire for that thing. As long as you're not being unethical, as long as you're not being dishonest, sometimes people need to have that realization of, hey, if you don't solve this problem in 6 months, in 9 months, in a year from now, what's that going to be like for you? And sometimes that is, oh man, if this isn't fixed in 6 months, it's going to drive me crazy. Cool. Now we've started to build that. And if you keep doing what you've been doing, do you think the problem's going to go away? No, that's why I'm talking to you. Cool. So now you're creating that emotional gap of, okay, maybe these guys are the people I need to get there.
Now, I'm sure there's someone listening in going, that sounds terrific, but what I do is a bit more intangible in value. It could be something like graphic design, for example. And I'm competing with AI in this day and age. How on earth do I help my clients quantify what they perceive to be as intangible, but perhaps somewhat necessary in order to justify my costs or my pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it always comes down to, what is this being used for? Because when you're in the mindset of, yeah, the guy that used to make our pictures is gone, we need a new guy that makes the pictures, right? They've commoditized that role. They've commoditized that service in their mind. And you have to break free from that if you're going to be presenting yourself as a high value thing. So I like to find out, where are these going to be used? Oh, they're going to be used on our social media, on our website. They're going to be used for ads. Okay, great. And when somebody discovers you, what's the path that they typically take? They usually find our website and then they always go to our Instagram to. Cool. And the perception that you have now, do you think that what's being used now is inviting and enticing these people to want to work with you? Do you feel like it's powerful enough that you look credible, that your business looks legit? No, that's why we want graphics. Okay, so now we can start to say, you're saying now what you're doing, the graphics that you have are actually lowering the credibility and the amount that someone might believe in your company. Now we can attach that to a sales metric. Because if we say 100 people come and 15 people go through because we look a certain level of credibility, well, what if these graphics actually told your story better, that really enhanced and showed your value? What if we could get 20 people instead of 15? And so I always say, like, where does the work get deployed? Who sees it? Who interfaces with it? And what impact does it have? Is it on something that's internal? Is it something that's going to make someone make a buying decision with us? Because even a great graphic as an ad versus a crappy graphic as an ad, you're still going to spend $1,000 putting that ad in front of people. What if it was 10% more effective, 20% more effective, right? Now my graphic actually has a monetary assignment to it.
Would it also make sense as part of that process if a client were to say, what specific things would you change in order to allow for that greater conversion, as opposed to just a generic statement that really isn't based on too much by way of facts?
Got it. Yeah, I think that comes down to preparation, right? So if I'm a graphic designer pitching a company to come on and do graphics, I would want to go, how does their website show up? How would I rate, audit? How would I assign the value or lack of value to it? I would go look up their ads on the ad library. I would go through their social media. So you probably have some suggestions in your mind right now. Now, that being said, it's very important to not just give away all this information as if it were nothing. Because what happens is, if you're like, hey, it's so easy, if you were to just this and this, then that would solve the problem. You're actually devaluing your expertise in what you do. And if I see it all the time, if we came in and do your Google ads, super easy. We would just make these couple of changes and we would whatever. All you're saying to that person is, hey, this isn't a hard task. You can probably do it yourself. You can probably figure it out. Like, you're screaming, don't hire me, to this person. So here's what I would say. If you're a graphic designer in a pitch meeting, you say, hey, listen, like, these are a couple of my quick observations. These are not based on me understanding your brand and exactly what you're trying to accomplish. At a surface level, just from a fundamentals, like, these are a couple quick things to look at. But until I get deeper into your brand and understand your customers better and understand your sales funnel better, that's when I'm actually going to be able to give you that full spectrum. And that's part of what I do. That's part of my offering is I'm going to sit in with you. I'm going to understand your customer journey and to make sure your graphics speak to that. So now you're putting it as that comes as part of my package with you rather than just spilling all the little tips and tricks.
That makes sense. Are there other resistance points that you typically encounter when helping clients transition to value-based pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. So the number one thing, and I get this resistance on almost every situation, is actually mindset. A lot of people could be told, hey, tomorrow you're going to double your price. But what happens is their subconscious doesn't believe it. They're like, yeah, but I was charging $10 and people were paying me. So how is the exact same thing that I do now worth 20 tomorrow? And people, if you don't actually have a belief in that price increase, the customer will, not even the customer, person you're trying to sell to is going to feel that. And so what I do is I do an exercise that says, here's all the things that are being caused by this problem not being solved. So if it's graphic design, it's like, how is it impacting them financially? Bad graphics means the business looks less credible, means less conversion. How is it helping? How is it hurting them operationally? So all the pieces. And then what I do is I look at what happens if they don't solve this problem in a month from now. And usually if you write down 10 things that happen, it's not that bad. It's a nuisance. I'm annoyed that I don't have a graphic designer. I get tired of interviewing people. But as you go like 6 months, 9 months, 12 months away, and these problems aren't solved, it has a compounding effect. And so the importance of actually finding a vendor who's good at what they do and can deliver the thing that they promised, that has a profound impact, bigger and bigger as the time goes on. So what I do is I do it as a thought experiment. What happens if this person doesn't get a great graphic designer who's creating conversion-oriented material for them? In 9 months from now, that's a really big pain in the butt. And when you see that, when you see the impact of it long-term, your brain starts to go, hold on, I guess if I don't make them wait 9 months and I solve this problem for them tomorrow, this actually makes a big difference for them. This helps their business a lot. And when you get that belief, you can then start to think about raising your price. But you have to have the mindset first.
I think you've reviewed thousands of sales calls. Mindset is obviously a big issue, but other than that, what would you say is perhaps the top 3 mistakes that you find consistently kills?
Absolutely. So I would say the top 3 are not listening to the questions. And so you are so focused on your script, what I have to do next, what I'm going to bring up next, what I have to say. Oh, now we got to present the 4 steps. Okay, they said this. Okay, now we got to do this. And oftentimes when someone doesn't buy, it's one little thing. It's one little thing that set them off, that turned them out of it, that moved them to being disinterested. And it's likely that they were screaming it. Now, not verbally screaming, but they asked you one question, and that was the root of the fear and the problem that they saw with what you offer potentially. And you were just like, oh yeah, that's no problem. We can do that. And by the way, here's this next step. And that one thing that you didn't answer because you weren't listening was the thing that stuck in their mind the entire sales call and made them not move forward. So that's one big thing. The second big thing is a lot of people actually don't do a good job of asking for the business. So I went through my proposal. Here's all the steps. Here's all the pieces. Yeah, just let me know. They don't stop and say, hey, I think we're a great fit together. I think this could help you. I would love for you to put your trust in me and move forward. How does that sound? How do you feel? Do you want to go for it? Like they just say, oh yeah, here's all the stuff. So just let me know if you want it. I see people not close calls so frequently. So that's a big one. And that just comes down to an underconfidence thing. So that one's a very blatant one, but it's there. And then I think the third one would be, so not answering questions properly, not closing, and then not creating the gap. So if there's some people do it differently. Some people do the discovery and the pitch in one. Some people do them in 2. But what happens is the discovery starts to bring out this emotional trigger of, yeah, you're right. We tried these things. We're frustrated. We wasted $15,000 on this. And so you've got this emotional charge from the person who's motivating them to buy. And then you get to the end and we're not leveraging that again. We're just like, oh, cool. And here's a bunch of list items and here's what we do. So let me know. And what we need to do is we need to connect how the pieces of how we work are going to fix those pains that were addressed earlier. We need to bring back that pain into the conversation. And I think when people get into the pitch, they just gloss over and they get into, here's the 50 things and it's going to take this long and here's the money. But the motivation and the emotion from the person buying, they don't see how that is going to fix the thing they told you earlier. So you have to bridge that gap.
How does that play out as the relationship or the project, if you will, progresses and you're really seeking to keep the client on long term?
Absolutely. So every time a client gives you a credit card, they have a moment of buyer's remorse. When they start with you, they have this, okay, I just gave this guy $1,000. Is this going to work? Is he going to do what he said he's going to do? So there's this immediate, oh God, did I just waste money? And if you think about it, they've probably tried working with people in the past that it didn't work out. And so that's where that fear comes from. So I think right at the beginning, making sure that this person has a very clear path, exactly what's going to happen, step by step, timeline, what the win looks like, all those pieces, that should be a guiding light at every step of the way. And so some people do the onboarding great. Hey, here's the next phases. This is the timeline. This is the whatever. And they think that's enough. So you have to have, but the ongoing communication is the biggest thing. And I've had clients leave my agency when they were getting like 4-to-1 and 5-to-1 return on their money. And I'm like, are you out of your mind? We're doing so good. Why are you leaving? And what I realized is they just felt like a number. They just felt the client number 405, push their ads through, whatever. And even if we were performing, our lack of communication broke that desire and that feeling of these guys are in it to take care of us and they've got our back and they're good. So what we've switched over to is we do a weekly or bi-weekly, depending on the client, we do a Loom video. And so it's not, hey, block off 15 or 30 minutes on your calendar. It's, hey, Susan, here's what's going on. Here's all the KPIs and how we're doing. This is what we're working on next. This is a little below what we want. This is what we're doing to fix it. If you have any questions, please let us know. And those Loom videos are 1 minute, 2 minutes long, but that they open them every week. And they just like to know that someone's paying attention to their business, that someone's putting in the effort, that someone's keeping things on track. And so it's those little things of just being great at communicating what you're doing. And in the agency world, it's like, yeah, that customer, they always get 7-to-1. They never need anything from us. They don't care. A new opportunity comes around. They talk to another company and they feel this engagement, this excitement. They want to learn about our business. They want to help us expand. If you've stopped giving that to your client, if you stop giving them that feeling, they're going to want to go to the person that feels like they're going to pay attention to the company. So just make sure you got to be on it and you got to be communicative all the time.
There's value in transitioning to this idea of value-based pricing. How does that change the positioning? And I'm not just thinking about the sales conversation, as we've covered already, but the positioning in terms of your LinkedIn profile, your website, etc. Is there a bit of a process to thinking through that side of things as well?
Absolutely. So I think the biggest mistake I see people make while they're making this transition is they think a list of deliverables is a product. And it's not. It's a commodity. And someone looking at all those line items can compare that with the price of someone else doing it. And so you're always in a race to this, okay, I'm going to have someone else do these pieces because they can do it for a bit less. And it starts to break it apart. So if you're going to switch to value-based pricing, you need to give your clients a product. Now, obviously not a physical product if you're a service-based person, but like you need to define what are your steps? What is the steps that take them from this pain thing that they're in to this transition, to this transformation that you promised? And the easiest way to do that is to have a 3 or 4 or 5-step process that is designed by you for your perfect customers so that they always get the best experience. It doesn't mean you're actually doing the work any different. The actual functional way that you do it is always the same, right? If you do graphic design, you have a process. If you do ads, you have a process. So the actual functional work doesn't change. But when you're presenting what's in it for the client, at each stage of your transformation, they're then saying, so instead of being like, first we do keyword research, and then we look at your competitor's website, and then we look at the cost for the clicks, and they're like, "Okay, what does that mean for me? How is that helping?" What we're doing is we're making the time to profitable campaigns shorter by diving in and doing this research. And they're like, "Oh, cool. I want faster results. I want to be profitable sooner." So step one is that's the step, right? The step, and however you name it or define it, it should be articulated as what is in it for the client. What is the outcome at this stage that they're going to be excited about? They don't care about the 10 tasks that equal it, but they care about the outcome. So I think what it is, taking it away from I'm a list of deliverables to here's my 4-step process. We do this 4-step process with every single client. At the end of phase 1, this is what you get. 2, this is what you get, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're saying, oh, they have a path. They have a specific way that I understand and I see the value in. And that little shift makes the buy-in from the consumer so much higher. If you just did that, if that's the only thing you take away from this conversation, package up what you do in a 3 to 5 step process, name it, and make it speak to what the client is going to get at each stage. That has been the number one thing that's
Could you give us an example just to help us wrap our heads around this?
Yeah. What I see a lot of times for an agency is first we research, and then we deploy the campaign, and then we manage the campaign, and then we give you analytics. Okay, so what does that actually mean for the client? That just means you're doing the job that I'm paying you to do. So that 4-step process is very like company centric. It's what's in it for the agency. I just want you to know that we're smart and that we know what we're doing. So it's these things. But like I said, if you turned research into what's in it for the customer, so the first phase then becomes like speed to profitability. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. So what happened? Then you explain it. You're like, we deployed these 10 research things to make sure we have all the data we need so your campaign can hit the ground running. So you're still explaining it, but it's what's in it for them first, right? And then launch, it's like, why is that a phase? Turning on an ad was part of the job. That's what I'm paying you to do. Then it becomes, okay, what's the next thing that's in it for them? Transparent results. Oh, I love having transparency. I don't really understand how ads work. So if you're going to give me the results in a transparent way, how do we do that? And then as you go on, it's scale profitably. I want to scale, but I want to make sure I'm doing it profitably. That's very exciting. That's a great step 3, right? But how do we do that? So we go into the account every single day and we optimize the campaigns and we do. So you can explain what you do, but what would the customer want to know that's going to happen for them? So that's how you would shift it. And for most people, I see it on their website. They have what's in it for me, the agency, and then actually underneath it, they explain the benefit to the customer. So for most people, you just have to flip that on its head. This is what you get, and then this is how we do it. So that it's a small change, but I'll tell you, it motivates the person buying if they know.
I often find that when people come onto a website, it's certainly one thing to say things that might appeal to my general interest. There is an element of, I guess, pre-awareness or jobs to be done type questions that I want to know a particular company or provider is able to meet, and before I even jump on a call or hit the demo button, etc. Is that something you work with clients to address?
Yeah, and I think a lot about it. So there's this idea of the first thing on your website being the who and do what statement. Who do I do it for? What do I do? So who do I do it for? So someone coming on is, oh, I'm a SaaS company above $2 million a year. Help them do what? To get through the operational what happens at that size is like growth and operations is usually very messy. So they get stuck because of those things. So we help get them unstuck, and we do it by our 4-step process, like our process. So I think where a lot of companies go wrong, and I've reviewed probably thousands of websites, is they explain everything just like I was saying with the 4-step process. They start with, I want them to know that I'm smart, that I'm capable, that I'm like technically sound. And so if they know I'm so smart, they're going to want to work with me. Wrong. So what I would do is go through and review on your website how many times you say I and we. How many of your sentences start with I and we? And for most people, it's 60 to 70% of them. And all you're really doing is saying, this is what I want you to understand about me. You are not articulating, this is what I understand about you, Mr. Potential Customer. And if they feel the connection, they feel like, wow, these guys understand where we're at, what we're suffering from, the pain, the desires that we have. If they read that in their own language, the way that they would speak about it and articulate it in what's in it for them, your website will convert massively better. And I think where people get stuck is that, but I need them to know everything. I'm so smart. I'm so good at what I do. I'm just going to load it up. I've been doing this and we do that. And here's all of our tasks. Like the person who's going to book a call with you doesn't actually care about how it's going to get done. You have the odd person who's very technical. I want to know the exact process you're going to use for this SEO. But the average person, I just want my website to show up more. I just want my graphics to represent our brand and build credibility and convert better. That's the end game for them. You really got to flip the language and flip how you're presenting. And remember that your website is not selling the final product, right? It's likely that you're going to get on a discovery call and then you're going to put together a presentation. That presentation, this is 3 steps away. That's going to sell the job. All we're trying to do right now is sell a phone call or a discovery or whatever you do at the beginning phase. So remembering that if you just load it up with information, someone who's very technical who gets what you do might be like, oh my God, these guys are so smart. But the average person buying has a million other tasks on their plate. They're thinking about a ton of other stuff. And they're just like, am I in the right place? What is this PPC optimization thing? You know what? Forget it. I'm out of here. So what do they need to know to feel understood? What do they need to read to feel understood? And like you have helped people just like them before. And then making it easy for them to get in touch with you. That's all your website should do, in my opinion.
Pricing. Should we, given the prices that you're outlining, should we have some sort of indicative pricing on our websites or to ensure that we're speaking to the right kind of people? Or is that something that we just keep to discovery and the sales type conversations?
Yeah, I would say for 95% of brands, never having the pricing on the website. Because then it's that commodity. Yeah. I'm just, okay, you're 1,000, this other guy's 700. He sounds better because he's cheaper. But that being said, what you should think about in your language on your website is, how do I attract the people who are my ideal customer? And how do I repel or be ignored or not be understood by people that aren't my ideal customer? So I've got someone who's living with me for 2 weeks. We're building his consultancy right now, right? He's built and sold 2 big branding companies. He's an expert. The guy's a subject matter expert. And he goes, yeah, those agencies that are like a year in that are making $500,000, there's so many holes and problems. Like they just need to scrap through. I could help them, but it's not what I want to do. Cool. So what do we say? I help creative businesses who are above $2 million do this thing. Now anyone that's $1 million is, oh, this isn't my guy. So we can use language to help them identify or unidentify as the person who should go through the process. And I think the more you narrow and the more specific you can get with that language, the better conversations you're going to have.
Just to paint a bit of a picture, as we transition to value-based pricing and the associated positioning, what does it do for the trajectory of a B2B company in terms of revenue growth and scaling?
Absolutely. So I think the more value you can get to extract in a conversation with a prospect, hey, if you did this for me, this would be worth my ideal outcome. If everything goes according to what we're talking about, this was worth $400,000 to me. So you now have to understand, okay, what is that threshold? Like, would you pay $100,000 to get 3? Would you pay $50 to get? So you got to play with that. But I think what happens is it has a profound impact on profitability. And I think what I see in a lot of like earlier stage companies is they came from this other place where they were either doing this in-house or they were doing it underneath someone else. And they're like, okay, I was worth $75 an hour when I did this thing. And this project, this transformation will typically take me this many hours. So they're in the mindset of a freelancer. And a lot of people have a hard time stepping into what does the business need versus what do I need? So if I used to make a living on $75 an hour, that sounds great. But as the volume of work ramps up with my customers, I don't have the bandwidth to do all that work now. So now that amount no longer serves when you need to bring on extra people, have a project manager, have somebody take over the work that you're doing, right? So a lot of people, they get stuck in this trap of this is what I know I'm worth or I've been worth underneath a different set of conditions in the past. And it crushes your ability to be profitable. I see so many people who are making 17, 25, 30 grand a month, and they're exhausted. And they're like, I feel like I should just go back to what I was doing before. There's no joy. I'm working 70 hours a week. I'm going crazy. And so I see it even with people that are great at what they do and who can get customers to say yes. If you're not getting them to say yes at the proper value you're assigning to it, you either lead to burnout or you lead to zero margin because you're just paying out of pocket every moment for all these other pieces to come in and you don't have the margin for it. So I think that's what it is. It's like when I think about growth, I think about sustainable growth. I think a lot of people fall into this trap of the advice is just scale. Just get 40 more customers and the money will figure itself out. No, it won't. If you're not selling based on the value of what you do and making a healthy margin because the business requires it, not you. You take your $75 an hour, but if you're going to do that, you need to be charging more so you can build an infrastructure because you're not going to be able to do every task, every moment at scale. It's going to be impossible. So I think that's the biggest trap that I see people falling into is they take that, if I put in this time output, that will increase the money output, and therefore that's how I make more money. And I think that's
as technology evolves, macro environments change around us. What would you be recommending to businesses to think through in order to future-proof their business?
That's a great question. So I think that if you're not using tools to make things go faster for you, you're leaving money on the table. So you might forever be able to, and I think, one other thought before I jump into that, profitability doesn't always come from charging more money. If you can do what you do in 50% of the time, that's more money for you just as much as raising the price. And I would say that people get really overwhelmed because they see all these marketing, these automation guys on the internet, and they're like, if you just click this one button, it does 34 things and like it runs our whole business. You know how often those things break and how much work they are to maintain, and like we're not there. But that being said, if you are ignoring tools and you are doing processes and you have team members doing every process manually, you're probably leaving a lot of money on the table by not implementing technology. So here's what I focus on first. What are the tasks that are low value? So they don't make the business money. They don't make the client experience like that much better. They don't directly relate to the transformation for the customer, but like they have to be done. And they're simple and they're repeatable. And maybe you have a virtual assistant doing it so it feels better. Well, I'm only paying them whatever an hour, so it's still better. Like their time could be better spent doing things when you could buy a $15 software to do the repeatable task for you. So I think it's don't try and bite off like we got to operationalize and automate the whole thing. I think it's like, what are the things that like don't bring in anything, but need to be done that are just really simple things? And can we automate those first? And then what I think you'll find is once you dive in and you start doing it a little bit, you're like, oh, this tool can also do this other thing. And then you're in the mindset of, oh, this other process is repeatable. There might be some variables to it, but I wonder if maybe there's another tool that does that. So I think a lot of people are just too afraid to even start. And I think it's do the little micro step, like that little thing that does that one thing over and over again, that little widget, right? Even if it's a $5 thing, what'll happen is your mind will start to open up about, like, okay, what else could we automate? How else could we make this simpler? And at the speed of which AI tools are coming, I'm not paying attention. Like I can't keep track. I talk to smart people all the time. They're like, oh, are you using this? Are you using that? I'm like, no. I've got my 4 things. They save me the cost of one employee. That's worth it. I have $100 a month tech stack that saves me the cost of an employee that just does all my simple stuff. That's enough. That's saving me a huge amount of money and a head count and a management of a person. That's wonderful. So keep it simple.
Some advice there. In the space of transforming businesses, primarily service-based businesses, from going from price driven to value-based revenue growth. Are there perhaps a couple of areas that we haven't touched upon that you find doesn't get much airtime? It doesn't get talked about very much. If so, what would they be?
I think when I was saying before about how we would want to discover for our clients and asking them what the goal is, what the vision is, I think that's one thing that people don't take a lot of time on. And they're like, this is how this type of company works. So these are the outputs, these are the inputs, this is what the service needs to look like. Because I worked for this guy and we just copy and pasted it. Or I saw this on my competitor's site and he makes money, so we copy and pasted it. I think a lot of people in business, they don't take the time to think about like, how much do I want to be doing? What do I want my life to look like? How do I want to spend my time and energy? And I had a customer this guy who was, again, making $17K a month, working like 60 hours. The guy's got three kids and one kid on the way. And he goes, I just feel like I should go back to my agency. And I said, what do you want your day to look like? I want to work like 35 hours a week. And then I want to go pick my kids up from school. And so it's not about scale. It's how do we do that within the confines of where we're at? And like you adding more customers in its current format is not the answer. So for him, it was like, hey, let's go reposition this so it looks more elevated, because you're charging $1,200 and you're creating $100,000 of value every month. There's a big disparity there, right? Like we got to close the gap on that. And so we used to charge like $1,200 to $1,400 a month. And we just switched it to $6,000 a month plus 3% of earned revenue. And now he's got 6 clients making double what he was doing with a small team. And so he gets to spend time with his kids. That's one example, but you have to be honest about what you want your lifestyle to look like, right? Maybe you're a single guy, you're hungry, you want to build something that's going to sell. Okay, that's a different thing. So I think the blueprint can't be universal, because it should start with like, how do you want your life to look like? Work is not life. Like none of these things are getting left behind. We're not going to leave with any of it. So I think a lot of people don't take that step back and say, in my ideal world, my business would look like this, so my life looks like that. So that's a big thing I focus on.
And to wrap things up, Mike, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Position your B2B service as a branded step-by-step process, determining what's in it for the client at each step. Don't worry about all the little task items that come below it. Most people don't care about that. And the truth is they're not buying that. They're buying, do I trust this person to do it? Do they have a process that I can understand, that I can follow? And do I believe that this is going to work for me? That's how people buy. They don't buy because you go into the ad account twice a day. They don't care. So that'd be the biggest thing. And that's the biggest unlock I see for my customers is once we do that, it changes the dynamic about how we talk about value and how we can talk about the cost of our programs and services.
Brilliant. If listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
Absolutely. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. It's Mike Moll, Moll. You can check out my website as well, mikemoll.co. I couldn't get the .com. So
no worries. We'll include links to that in the show notes. Mike, this has been terrific. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me.